Everyone is a book of blood. Wherever we're opened, we're red.
Have you checked the children? Your little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Bienvenidos, Fright fans and hordes of hedonistic heathens. I'm Jaime En Fuego, and I am so very stoked to be welcoming you back once again to my monthly segment here on the horror show, Backer at the Moon! Ha ha ha! Yes, indeed. And yes, super stoked to be continuing the coverage of none other than these books of blood. Yeah, if you can kind of see that particular segment, and so on visual, I should say. And yeah, so we had previously done the first three, which were already covered in separate installments, and then I had to order so I could have a physical copy, but also do my damn diligence to do the listening process as well, because anytime I am doing this sort of book coverage, I like to both read and then later on listen, just to, I don't know, narrator, sort of, you know, just, I don't know, the approach of somebody when they are reading a tale, as Stephen King, you know, because I do hail to Stephen King here on the horror show, has all too often said, is that when you have somebody read you a story, it can often invoke, like, a little bit of a difference in your interpretation, your emotional reaction and everything. And so, yeah, man, I did the exact same thing with this fourth volume of the Books of Blood, and there are 6 in total, and so we are continuing onward, and just in the preceding sort of things, though, that I wanted to bring up, because upon a little bit of research, I found out that Clive Barker did adaptations in the comic book world of these, which were really cool, and I've discussed with Cecil, because he's been doing a lot of comic book, like, horror stuff for the TikTokies. And yeah, I'm not really a TikTok person, but I know just the reach for us as a brand and for just entertainment coverage of the scarific variety goes, that this stuff is important. And so while we have also discussed how we're going to start covering some alien stuff as well, because there's so many alien comics, especially from back in the Dark Horse days, but yeah, tapping the vein is something where it was adapting individual versions of 2 stories at a time, and yes, that one is still in its protective garb and stuff, and so some of the stories are of the later volumes, so I haven't got to them just yet, but I specifically left the one out from book 4, which covers Hell's Event, which is about a race with, like, hell that's kind of incognito, so to speak. I talked about it in a previous entry here. But then there is also something called the Madonna, which I believe is from either Volume 5 or Volume 6. I just did not properly research that beforehand. But if you check out this artwork, man, like, see that? And then this might get us demonetized. It's crazy. It is very crazy in that regard. So I look forward to actually venturing into the TikTokies in the less than 3 minutes, as opposed to my long podcast, like the discussions about the Clive Barker stuff. And also, just to inform properly, once again, once the Books of Blood are finished, I will most definitely be segueing into the novels. I was, you know, talking about this with Cecil, I was thinking about it, and yeah, I mean, the only one that we had previously reviewed, you see it right back there, the Scarlet Gospels, and it was badass, it was rad statusness, you know, to quote Bill Paxton, rest peacefully, in a deleted scene from Aliens that's in the director's cut, man, you know, state of the badass art. And so, yeah, I very much look forward to checking out Damnation Game and getting into Weave World and, you know, Great and Secret Show and some of those other things that I've often heard a lot of stuff about, because his prose is so significantly different from what I encounter from Cy King, and I would imagine that's because he's, you know, from the UK, and there is a slight bit of eloquence that I feel like is not, and this is not a slight on my beloved Cy King, you know, who I've covered for over 300 episodes here on the Horror Show for Hail to Stephen King, but it's most definitely where I'm just like, yeah, there is a difference of sophistication to the approach at times, and that's where, when we talk about this particular 4th volume of the Books of Blood, it's where I most definitely found it to be the most apparent that at times Clive really just, when he's feeling a subject and he just gets on a roll, he just goes, you know? And then there's other times where I most definitely, especially in some of his tales that are set in America, which one in particular that takes place in Texas that we'll talk about in this happens, I'm just like, I feel like he goes for more of a plain approach sort of thing, you know, more so of that Stephen King or just a great American novelist, I don't know, like a Kerouac or whatever, where it's like, okay, I'm not trying to just string together the most lovely and eloquent sort of thing. It's more so about the story and less so about the prose, but as Clive most definitely does in the final story in this, he gets very, his personal viewpoints on the world are very intriguing to me, and so, but just as I always did with these before, now I believe in the third volume when I was covering that, because I love the celluloid story so much, I went in like a countdown order as opposed to, you know, just talking about the stories as they were actually published throughout the tale. I'm not going to do that within this one because I did find the final one to be the most fascinating. And so I know that there was also a reversion of ordering within this, because the fourth volume of the Books of Blood was actually released specifically with a subtitle as The Inhuman Condition. And gotta say, it's not really a story that wowed me too much until you finally get to the end, and these are always non-spoiler, everybody, just to clarify, and so I'm not gonna spoil, like, any juicy, you know, goodies or anything that transpire, especially in, like, you know, the back end of these short stories that Clive did. But, so The Inhuman Condition is about a group of, dare I say, teenage hooligans, you know, in the UK, and they find this guy named Pope, ironically enough, especially with some of the religious stuff that's occasionally talked about throughout all of these stories. And, yeah, they beat the shit out of him, and they're like, oh, he's got a bottle of alcohol, you know, sure, we'll take that, and they're looking for anything else, so he's like a weird, like, street dude, you know, he's a transient, or, you know, bum, as some people call it here in America. And, yeah, there's a very strange thing that our main character that we focus upon discovers when they're just like his coat, they're, you know, shaking it out to see if there's anything of importance in there. And it's like a knotted bit of string or something, almost like, I mean, I don't know how better to describe it than that, and it goes into the fact that he has always been just kind of a simpleton in some regards, where, you know, mathematics and even like foreign languages and stuff like that, it's never been like his deal, you know? And yet, he has always loved simple puzzles. He was just raised by a single mom, so no siblings, no father, and he's always found, like, these sort of things, like puzzles and whatever, to be the most fascinating, and where he could just lose hours in the captivation process. And yeah, he starts unraveling a string, and it essentially goes into, with further unraveling this, like, cord of, you know, fabric that has been so meticulously intertwined, almost in, like, this maze-like puzzle of sorts. He starts unleashing, I guess maybe demons, but they're all of different varieties, and this is where you have to really, like, tread lightly. But it's another one of those stories that is Clive experiencing and just exploring the life of these hooligan sort of people, those who are not living, like, the most justifiably amazing lives or anything, and they do have some further encounters with Pope, and especially as, I mean, I know they say it in the Wikipedia synopsis, but the stuff starts to happen to his friends, you know, and there is kind of a creature aspect to it, there is kind of a cool otherworldly aspect, but, you know, it was an interesting story, and when it really started chug-a-lugging by the end of it, that's when I was significantly more intrigued with this particular tale. But I always have said in these Books of Blood reviews that I've done for Barker at the Moon that when a tale really, like, you know, Son of Celluloid, like, really gets me, I'm just like, hell to the yeah, and I will, like, proclaim how rad status I thought it was. This one, it just didn't do it that much for me, man. You know, I'm artist subjective. If you're really into this, it's definitely a sustained in length of narrative where this could be adapted into a film. And the next one we're actually going to talk about is, you know, it was adapted into half of a movie, you know, but, yeah, The Inhuman Condition, the fact that it was the front-loaded story in the original paperback release when they were all being released individually, but then it was repositioned when this was put out here in the States, and I think that's because maybe as high on it as Clive was, perhaps. Like, it, you know, maybe some other people were just like, yeah, that story's not as good as you may think it is, you know? And so that's no slight, that's no, you know, shit talking, that's just, once again, as I always say, art is subjective, personal opinion. But the next one, which is actually in the revised US order, the first one, is called The Body Condition. And, or excuse me, the Body Politic, excuse me, yeah, I'm thinking of the Inhuman Condition, but the Body Politic was actually adapted into a segment of this just combining of the biggest horror forces at the time in the world, which were, you know, obviously Stephen King and Clive Barker, and there were all of those different paperbacks and you know, just stuff that was put out where Cy King, who had already established himself, you know, in the late 70s, mid and late 70s, you know, and not till Carrie, when the film came out, was when he became like that big-time juggernaut. But, so as far as like his endorsement of Clive was huge, and that's why, for those Books of Blood, and for even a few other things, I think afterwards, like Damnation Game and some of the early novels, they just put it on everything, you know? It was very much like bromance, not maybe the sort of bromance that Clive would prefer, you know, but, and that's no slight of any kind, you know, and we'll get to the final story and just the interesting aspect of Clive's exploration of sexuality in that Age of Desire story. But, yeah, so the Body Politic was, along with Chattery Teeth, which, you know, since I'm gushing about King, I don't like Chattery Teeth. I don't think it's that good of a story, but I've talked about this previously. The Body Politic, though, it's another one of those situations where I feel like Clive Barker was trying to delve into dark humor. I don't necessarily know if it was as effective as he intended it to be. So it's essentially about how there is a sentient cognizance in your hands. Yeah, seriously. So think, for instance, like Thing, you know, from the Addams Family. So just a hand, you know, running around. Or think of the amazing scene in Evil Dead 2 where, you know, he's like, it got in my hand and went bad and I had to cut it off, which they also redo in Army of Darkness a little bit. So, yeah, it's this guy who's a factory worker, and, yeah, his hands are talking to each other, like almost telepathically. It is incredibly strange, and there is eventual severance of hand, and once again, since I'm dancing around the spoilers, you don't want to really do that. I'm trying to remember, since I have not watched Quicksilver Highway in a long time, but I obviously own it because of the Chattery Teeth segment in the Cy King adaptation aspect, and how I have to, you know, be a completist and have everything Cy King. So, as opposed to being a factory worker, if I remember correctly, dude was like a surgeon maybe, which in some ways like makes a lot more sense for the prolificness of the use of your hands and how they would be more in tuned and astute and smart. I don't know. I will have to rewatch this. I unfortunately did not have time this past week since the channel was taken over and we were making sure that we can at least get some content out and whatnot. But yeah, it's a peculiar concept. I mean, it seems like it's a lot scarier on the printed page in comparison with what I recall about Quicksilver Highway, because we eventually have armies of hands going around, directed by Mick Garris too, by the way. You know, shout out to him and all the respect, obviously. But there are certain stories that, you know, they seem fine on paper, you know, when you're just reading them. And then when they're visualized, you're just like, oh, it's a lot sillier. Yeah, and unfortunately the Body Politic is one of those, but I most definitely, you know, wanted to at least, oh yeah, Matt Frewer, and he is a plastic surgeon, so I'm actually taking a peek. So Matt Frewer, who was, Trash Can Man in the Stan miniseries, great actor. I think he did some work on Star Trek TNG as well. But in any event, if you want to track down a visualization of the Body Politic, well, this is your destination for that Quicksilver Highway. I'm not sure if it, and yeah, that's right, Christopher Lloyd is in it too. But so yeah, I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. Didn't do that proper research, but I'm sure you just do a quick Google search, track that chisel down, and you will find. And as we continue along throughout the proceedings, now we get to a story which is ironically like one of the shortest things. Like, I didn't even realize that Clive Barker wrote stories this short. Now granted, I didn't take a look at the, you know, page count of like both 5 and 6 as far as the Books of Blood go, but this one is legitimately like, I think like 5 or 6 pages, and it's called Down, Satan, but with the, just deliberate sort of, punctuation put in there of the comma. And so, since it's so short, it's really tough to even talk about in a lot of ways, but so there's essentially a guy who decides to, and he's a very rich entrepreneurial sort of dude, and insane amounts of money, but he is in fear of his soul after, just turning a blind eye to his Catholic upbringing. And he has a very peculiar way of trying to redeem himself, which entails building his own version of hell on earth in North Africa, if I remember correctly. So it's bonkers, it genuinely is, and how he descends into madness because of the fact that he is, by building a hell on earth, attempting to summon Satan, to there for some oddly, without spoiling things, aspect of like redeeming himself to God after so many years of disregard. And it's weird. It's very short, but it's very prolific. And some of the discussion of like the fact that, like Dante style, dude legitimately built his 9 levels, and the loss of life, and the evil disciples he incurs and stuff. This is a story that I honestly wish was longer. I was disappointed in the fact that it almost makes me feel like Clive started it and then decided to abandon it, so to speak, is what I would theorize, because of the fact that the concept on paper, man, is fucking solid, really intriguing, and could be expanded into a full movie. Now, granted, if he's building 9 layers of hell, and there's furnaces to burn people in, and all of this sort of craziness, yeah, you would need a budget, You could not mess around unless you had, a decent amount of money to make this and visualize it and make it interesting. Or perhaps I'm wrong, and this could, art is subjective, especially with your approach in adapting it, as I often say. And so for that reason, yeah, maybe he could just, it could be a situation where it's almost like, a montage of the madness, and you don't have to really go into massive exploratory stuff, because that's what Clive ended up settling upon, is putting the shortest story in less than 10 pages out in one of the books of blood, because most of them have been like 20, 30, like 40 pages. They've been in that range where there's a lot more like meat on the bone to chew, so to speak. And it's still fascinating from a maniacal conceptual level. It truly is. And so, respect to Clive for just being weird, man. And now we're about to get into a little bit of additional weird, and so it's only when passages really like strike themselves out to me as being completely captivating. And I know in all of the previous 3 entries that I've covered here, it's been like, since he has the different approach to his prose a lot of the time, there's certain stories where like nothing really, like, man, you're like throwing everything into the wall, right? Hoping something sticks. And there's definitely portions where nothing sticks for me, as far as just having that prolificness to it, where I definitely feel the desire and the need in discussing these stories to really read some stuff. But in the final couple stories, that's where it's really much more intriguing. And so we're jumping into a very plainly titled tale, which is called Revelations. And Revelations it's got an interesting aspect of duality, because of the fact that we're essentially following 2 different couples, and then we have like kind of a third couple that just kind of originates. But I was most compelled because of the fact that it approaches from a religious standpoint. Okay, and so my father is still the occasional pastor, not a full-time pastor. He like subs for the Reformed Baptist congregation that he's in. I haven't been a churchgoer for almost 2 decades now at this particular point, but I still have a reverence for the faith and for a lot of the just positive morality that was indoctrinated within me, even if I definitely did not agree with a lot of what was going on. But so anything that is, when you attended a Christian school for 18 years of your life and went to church 3 times a week and everything, like, it's gonna have a residual sort of aspect to it. And this story most definitely harkened back to that. And that's because, so you have a traveling pastor, like some, just prime noteworthy speaker, and the fact that his wife is supportive on the surface level, but she's also like taking sleeping pills and not happy within their marriage, and she's supportive, as often happens within marriages, but she's most definitely, like, not portrayed as being completely happy. And they stay at this Texas motel. And this is where it's always interesting when Clive is writing, you know, America, when I don't even know if he had, like, spent any extensive time in America in the mid-'80s when he was writing the Books of Blood and finally getting them published and everything. But, yeah, so just so happens the hotel that they, excuse me, motel, because there is a difference between that M and that H, right? And the motel that they stay at happens to have a very bloody history. It is called the Slaughterhouse of Love, because of the fact that 30 years before, there was this woman who had a cheating husband, and she friggin' blew his brains out, or shot him in the chest, killed him, you know. But yeah, she capped that fool, man, and yeah. Their spirits, even though she went on to be executed on the electric chair, their spirits, in a very interesting sort of thing back to some Stephen King stuff that I've read. I think it's called Willa, if I remember correctly, which is from Just After Sunset. Terrific story. And it's about displaced people who loved each other, but since they died in separate places, the fact that they're trying to, you know, reconnect and whatever. And despite the bloody ending for this couple, they have reconnected, and they have gone back to this particular motel, and so there are these two ghosts at this motel, at the same time that there is this other woman who was married to the pastor, who is, she's been kind of wondering about her, I guess, just intuitiveness, you know, and her perception to, the, you know, I see dead people, you know, like Sixth Sense sort of shit, and that's kind of what she is becoming just, you know, much more aware of because of the presence of those two. And there's also a subplot with the, you know, assistant, handler, friend, I don't know what you would particularly classify him as, of the pastor, who that he has like a little fling with the daughter of the guy who owns the motels. And so this is a very fascinating tale. It's easily my second favorite because of the fact that, you know, it explores romance, it explores the disillusion, and the desolation of it, you know, disillusioning aspect too, you know, which is what I was, you know, trying to jump on there for a second as well. And yeah, it just the duality and the counterbalance between, you know, these two different unhappy couples, and you know, and telling each other to like enjoy eternity, you know, because they're trying to make it work, even in an essence where they can't completely cross over. It was really weird. It was very Clive, and I definitely appreciated the exploration, especially of the fact that the Reverend husband, okay, he's obsessed with Revelation, and with most people of faith that I know, they're either Old Testament or they're New Testament, and if they're New Testament, they're probably primarily like obsessed with the four Gospels, you know, but husband is obsessed with Revelation, and it's described by, I think her name is Virginia if I remember correctly, but the wife of the pastor at one particular point as a drug dream of Armageddon, more comical than intimidating, and I can't even remember the last time I read you know, Revelation, but that's obviously where the title for the story came from, which makes sense, I suppose. But also the Slaughterhouse of Love, the fact that it turned into a tourist trap because 30 years before this woman had killed her husband. So it's just from a relational standpoint, it's really intriguing and interesting, and yeah, this is definitely one with enough of that proverbial meat on its bone that I was mentioning, where it could easily be a feature. And I think this could be adapted into a feature in a very low-budget sort of situation because of the fact that it's really just a lot of conversations amongst people. And those are some of my favorite stories, man, you know, where it's just people talking, you know, and that's why I love Kevin Smith so much, obviously. So, yeah, Revelations is easily my second favorite, and it's probably, to be fair, like neck and neck with the final story, which we are about to round the proceedings out with, which is called The Age of Desire. And this is Clive Barker talking about, like, I mean, his views on sexuality, his views on sustainability in the case of, like, how much pleasure could you contend with and still be able to function. So, without getting into spoilery details once again, it's about a guy who escapes from a place where he was going through some testing, you know, some very weird sort of libido amplification is the way that I will describe it, without getting too nasty about it. And there were previous trials on monkeys, and so and some of them, like they get to that at a particular point later. But, so he escapes, and there are investigators that are there trying to figure out what the hell happened, track down said person who had killed a woman upon escape, and, like, you know, the entire facility is, like, wrecked and messed up and stuff. And yet, it jumps between various perspectives, which I appreciated so significantly, because you get some chapters that are from the perspective specifically of the escapee. I think Jerome was his name, if I remember correctly. And then you also have Cardigan, I believe, is the lead investigator. And so yeah, you've got the lead investigator who is, you know, trying to track Homie down, and he's into hot chocolate and whatever. And there's specific passages. It makes me think Clive Barker likes drinking hot chocolate because of the way that he describes, like, the film on the top when you let it sit for a second and stuff. I'm just like, all right, man, whatever, that's cool, you know. But this whole story oozes sordid sexuality, and I think the dangers of overindulgence is what this story really boils down to. But yet, it also veers into, because I've got, finally, a few specific passages where, besides just a quote, I want to, like, read some of these particular passages. And so, Carnegie, who is this lead investigator who we spend the predominance of our time of, we get a lot of his just waxing intellectually about stuff. And this is where, like, when it comes to Clive's prose, like, when he flows, when he's really on it, I respect the hell out of it. And so this is where the lead investigator, Carnegie, has been dropped off, and he likes to have his taxi cab not drop him off right at his house. He likes to have himself dropped off a little ways away so that he has a time for a walk and a think and that sort of thing. And so he's observing as he walks, and let's just go into it, right? Tonight he walks slowly to allow the distressing scenes the evening had brought to recede somewhat. The route took him past a small cinema which he had read in the local press was soon to be demolished. He was not surprised. Though he was no cineste, the fare the Fleetplit provided had degenerated in recent years. The week's offerings was a case in point. A double bill of horror movies, lurid and derivative stuff to judge by the posters, with their crude graphics and their unabashed hyperbole. You may never sleep again. One of the hook lines read, and beneath it a woman very much awake, cowered in the shadow of a two-headed man. What trivial images the populace conjured to stir some fear in their audiences. The Walking Dead. Nature grown vast and rampant in a miniature world. Blood eaters, omens, firewalkers, thunderstorms, and all the other foolishness the public cowered before. It was all so laughably trite. Amongst the catalog of penny dreadfuls, there wasn't one that equaled the banality of human appetite, which horror, or the consequence of same, he saw every week of his working life, you know, being a detective and investigating nasty shit. Thinking of it, his mind thumbed through a dozen snapshots. The dead by torchlight, face down and thrashed to oblivion. And the living, too, meeting his mind's eye with hunger in theirs. For sex, for narcotics, for others' pain. Ugh. Why didn't they put that on the posters? Good stuff, man. That's why when Clive goes. And it gets very Clive, as this guy who was experimented on goes around raping dudes and you know, and women too, you know, not to forget about that. And in some ways it does make me feel like, yeah, Clive was like slightly titillated by approaching this sort of just sexual zaniness, but he does just get, like, you know, a deserted ship of science is what he describes the place as. But a few other quotes that I just have to run through because, once again, I'm not trying to spoil what ends up happening in the end of this tale. But yeah, our guy Jerome is one of those faces that awake the bully and drunkards. Like, he considered himself somebody that was kind of past their prime and not able to, like, find somebody to sleep with unless he's, like, throwing out money, you know? And so for that reason, yeah, it's kind of sad. Now, cautious as a cat on broken glass, that's definitely one of my favorite bits in here. And then after the cop gets raped by him, without getting into super spoilery stuff, he's like, well, he'll have to live in self-disgust until memory fails him. So, but yeah, the fact that it's about sexual obsessives and the danger of screwing themselves to death and everything, and also Clive's commentary, very, very candidly, about specifically everywhere the body has merchandise. And he's talked about the sex industry before, you know, in that tale of the male prostitute that I believe was in the 3rd volume that I discussed previously. The title's eluding me, regrettably. But this is definitely like his observation of how extreme things can be, and yet also there is discussion about the possibility of, you know, perfecting this sort of science. And this was in the 80s, you know, this is before like boner pills, you know, like the Viagras and whatnot. And so it's definitely different in that regard too, which I find interesting. And so it's very much, especially with how some of the passages are written of our Jerome character, as he is like veering back and forth with the experiments that have done to him and why he's out, you know, just perpetrating all these awful crimes and stuff. It's very, so sex, psychedelic, it's very sexadelic, and you know, it's sexadelia 100%, the strangeness of this story. And you know, just the idea of having a expiration date of it, if you overindulge, and dying of terminal joy. Yeah, it's a very, very intriguing tale, and easily my favorite of these 5 different stories in the 4th volume of the Books of Blood. And I will be continuing once a month to taking a little diversion from Hail to Stephen King to do some Barker at the Moon. And yeah, after these next 2 installments, we will be doing The Damnation Game, sitting right there on the shelf, although that's a reader's copy, and I believe it's like a book club copy, which kind of bugs me because I want all of my hardcovers to be like of that symmetrical sort of evenness, you know, when they're sitting on the shelf. But yeah, everybody, thank you so very much. Grande gracias, as I all too often say. That is the end of the proceedings for today in the Clive Barker coverage. Barker at the Moon. Ha ha ha. I've been Jaime En Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. We finally, after 16 days, have our channel back. And yeah, we did a live trailer reaction roundup, which was pretty rad status. As far as the most recent Hail to Stephen King episode, that was also just rounding out the last of the Children of the Corn films, which was, what, I think Revelation and Genesis is the weird subtitles of both of those. So not as intriguing as like Urban Harvest or some of those other you know, subs that they did for like 3 and 4 and 5 and whatnot. But nonetheless, so yes, Hail to Stephen King is typically here on Tuesdays, but every month I do a little departure and I Barker at the Moon. So like, share, subscribe, all that rad statusness. If you would like to be a patron and help to support the channel, which is greatly appreciated, there's all the information in the deets below. If there's something you would like us to review, do a commentary for, whatever it may be, lots of coolness there. And also make sure to go and check out all the coolness that Cecil is doing on the Horror Show TikTok. I believe it's Horror Show Cecil is his vid there, or his, you know, like link up sort of thing there. And he's been doing lots of comic reviews, and hey, he's a TikToker. I am not, you know, I'm not Kesha in that regard. But yeah, man, this is always a fun little diversion for me from the Cy King stuff, because there is a very distinctive difference to the way that Clive approaches writing, which I fucking love, man. You know, it's really rad status. So, in any event, I've been Fuego. Y'all have been amazing. And, yes, until the, well, Reel of Ka, I guess, in this particular point, if we're going to consider the Quicksilver Highway comes around once more. Hasta luego, San amigos. And, yes, constant readers can also read other things, which is great. And I look forward to us having more of this discussion about Mr. Barker sooner rather than later. And until then, remember to stay scared and read Mr. Clive.